My name is Kathy Cochran. I am an alcoholic and my sobriety date is July 4th, 2010. And before I go any further, I'm introducing my first sponsor and my now best friend.
Hello.
Who comes to my rescue. Her name is Kathleen. Thank you. You can go on about your business now, George.
I'm going to listen from over here.
I'm here to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, or even better, to share some, hopefully some experience, strength, and hope with everyone, those in treatment and those joining us virtually. I've kind of divided this into great big segments, my early years, 0 to 18. My family was not a normal family, so to speak. My dad drove long distance east to west coast hauling furniture. So I really didn't know my dad, know him, until about 3 or 4 years ago when I moved closer. That led to some issues in my life, I believe, that I shared with my sponsor when I did my 4th step. My mother was an alcoholic. And after I was married for about 5 years, I guess, she wrote me a letter telling me that she was an alcoholic and she had been to an AA meeting, and she actually sent me a copy of the 12 steps. I have a sister who is 4 years younger than I am. And so I was kind of her protector growing up, even though she probably should have been the one who, well, she did try to protect me because I was verbally and emotionally abused. I guess that's why I was a bedwetter, a thumbsucker, a sleepwalker, and a nail biter. And when I got my husband, the man I married, he said, I'm not going to marry you if you still bite your nails. So that's how old I was before I got over that one. But all of that, I don't know, it's kind of weighed on me emotionally, I guess, more than I thought it did at that point. But it also made me stronger in a weird kind of way. When I was growing, I grew up mostly in the mountains of Western North Carolina, even though we did move around a lot because my dad was driving the truck, and it was Miami or New London, North Carolina. Just try to be closer to him. But most of my growing up was in the mountains of Western North Carolina. We lived with my grandmother. There was no running water in the house. So I loved drawing water from the well in the side yard. But those were good years for me. Those were good. I enjoyed that a lot. But I went to a Southern Baptist church growing up, and every single Sunday, at the end of the sermon, they had, the call to come up and repent. And I always ended up feeling like if I didn't go up to the altar and repent, and I was a child, that I was going to get run over by a truck before I could get back to church the next Sunday. So it didn't, even though I went to church on a regular basis, it never really did anything for me. So I was kind of confused when I finally got to Pavillon about that, or not confused, but just I was over. I didn't want any part of it by that time. I did very well in high school, very well in all my grades, and then I graduated from high school, and I was like a bird out of a cage. Those are the fun years, 18 to 54. Those were fun. When I got to college, I was engaged when I got to college, but that engagement got broken. And then I met the man I married, and he was one of those bad boys, I guess is the best way to put it. He was into everything. And so we not only drank a lot, but we did a lot of other substances also throughout those till I was 54 years old and beyond, and a little beyond. But you know, it was fun then. And it was, those were the years where the hippie years, where you had bell-bottom jeans with braids down the side of them. And my first rock concert was the Iron Butterfly. And that's when they were streaking on campus. And it was just, oh, I had a good time then. You know, it's kind of weird. Um, but you know, there was a lot of partying going on, and the man I married was in a fraternity, a real heavy duty party fraternity, and I drank. I didn't drink to be part of the group at all or to have fun. I drank to tolerate it because I was born introverted, and I mean off the chart introverted. And nothing, it doesn't matter what anybody has said to me, like you need to make connections and da 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 and do this, even after sobriety. I am still an introvert. I prefer to be alone or with one person at a time. And so that's why I drank. And and even then I would find myself, if I could, in the kitchen cleaning up. So I wouldn't have to have any interaction with anybody. So that went on, and I had after college, I started my profession. I started off teaching math in high school, and then I jumped to elementary school, and then I jumped to junior high school, and then I became a principal, and I ended up my years of teaching, my education by being principal of an elementary school. I loved my job. I never had any children of my own, so all of those children were my children. And when I retired when I was 50, I retired at 53 years old. When I retired, it left a huge hole in my heart. I don't know why I retired. I tried to tell myself it was because I looked down the road and knew if I worked 5 years more, and you know, the state did the highest 3 years of your salary, that I wasn't going to be making any more after so many years. But it may have been I was just ready to just be alone and drink some more. So I don't really know the answer to that. But anyway, leaving the kids left a big hole in my heart. And I had to find a way to fill it. And I didn't for a long time. Then there's a downward spiral from 54 to 60. And I remember the day I crossed the line. Of course, after I retired is when my drinking really picked up. And for some reason, I decided I didn't drink for 6 weeks. I just quit drinking for 6 weeks. Didn't bother me. But then it was one really hot summer day. I was in the carport, and I said, maybe a beer would be good. That was it. And my husband said, yeah, that'd be good. I think I was easier to get along with when I was drinking. And so he was a real enabler with my drinking. So that is the day. And I remember it distinctly that I crossed that line. That's when, you know, I really don't remember a lot between 54 and 60, because I was drinking all the time. I get up in the morning. I kept a bottle of schnapps under my bathroom sink, and I'd get up in the morning and I'd go get something to drink. Beer is typically what it was. And of course, that's when I started hiding it. I was lying. My husband would say, are you drinking? And I'd say, no. Well, he knew I was lying. I knew I was lying. And I knew he knew I was lying. And, you know, anybody that knows an alcoholic can tell they're drinking. It'll take about 2 minutes after they open their mouths. I started making all kinds of excuses, of course, why I couldn't go here. I couldn't go there to a family meeting or to visit friends. I just wanted to be a hermit, to stay in my little mole hole. I also had bad hygiene. I don't know how many days I'd go without taking a shower. And I think that from what I hear, that's pretty typical. But the worst thing is I was an absent wife and daughter and sister. My husband started working in the basement all the time. So he stayed in the basement when he got home from work. I'd actually leave him notes. Are you going to eat supper? And then he'd get home from work, go to the basement, come up and eat supper if he said yes is an answer. So it was like, I didn't see him real often at all during the evening when he got home from work. So I feel, I was just absent. And my dad and sister knew something was wrong with me, but they didn't know what. And I can't believe they didn't figure that one out, but they didn't. So that went on for 6 years, and I didn't really think much about it. Nothing really bad happened to me. I have a really boring story. But I have a lot of yets, and I live with good fear because that will help me keep me from picking up a drink. And by the grace of God, I haven't had to pick up a drink since 2010. I finally started drinking so much that I almost fell one evening afternoon, and I had to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom and nothing but blood came out. And so I called my brother-in-law. He came up, they took me to the hospital. I was admitted to the hospital and I had an ulcer on my duodenum and where the colon meets the large intestine. I think that's what it is, where it is. But anyway, so they cauterized that and kept me there for 2 days maybe. And then they sent me home. So when I got home, being the good alcoholic that I am, I thought, oh, this is cauterized. I can have a beer. So I got one. A couple hours later, I had to go to the bathroom again, blood. So I called my husband and he had his brother come up the hill to get me and took me to the hospital. And of course, the cauterization didn't work. But anyway, in the meantime, while I was in the hospital being fed intravenously and all other kinds of things, my husband at that time was looking for a treatment center, a place for me to go. And one day, even when I was in the hospital, I took a Xanax and put it down the bathroom sink. I still had it in my pocketbook. That's crazy kind of stuff. And my sister had mailed it to me, which is probably illegal over state lines. But anyway, that's how goofy I was by the time I got to the hospital. Anyway, my Sam came up to me one day and he said, okay, I've got 2 places. You can make a choice. You can go to Tennessee or you can go to a place called Pavillon. It's about halfway between our house and your parents' and your dad and sister, your parents' house. I said, then I'll go to Pavillon. He talked the hospital into keeping me there I was there for a total week before he came and got me and took me straight to Pavillon from the hospital. And that was in 2010, a little before July the 4th. I can't remember. I couldn't remember the last day I had a drink. So I just moved it forward a little bit. After I got to Pavillon, I started my uphill climb, and Pavillon, I will tell you, what a blessing. It was the beginning of saving my life. I did what they told me to do. I ate everything I could get my hands on in the cafeteria. And that's when we could go down at night and they had a refrigerator and we could get whatever we wanted out of the refrigerator, yogurt and I love that Activia, peach Activia. So that's what I used to get out of the refrigerator. And Shannon Buck was my counselor. I think she still does some work on campus. I don't remember who my extended care counselor was right now, but I know she's not at Pavilion anymore. Shannon was talking to me about going to extended care. And I said, if you try to tell me I need to go or talk me into it, I'm not going. And then, I got to thinking about that and I thought, nah, Kathy, you're not going to stay sober if you go home now. And so I made the decision, I'm going to extended care. And that was really another wonderful experience. When I was in extended care, they kept telling us, you need to get a sponsor while you're here. You need to get a sponsor while you're here. And so we went to the Columbus group, I believe it was once a week. And there was a girl in the Columbus group that spoke, and I always liked the way what she said. And so I called her one day. I got her number. No, I didn't call her. I got her. I did get her number, but that was after I asked her to sponsor me while I was at Pavilion, my treatment sponsor. And I talked her into it. I said, I'm not going to be in any trouble because I'm at Pavilion, and they were used to Pavilion folk going down there. There's nothing, I can't do anything. So, I just need somebody that I can connect with while I'm here. And so I connected with Whitney. And wouldn't you know it, on my first sober anniversary, Whitney actually called me and asked me if I had somebody that was going to be with me at a meeting. And of course, I had Kathleen. So that was wonderful. But I can't say enough good things about Pavilion. Did I absolutely like everything? No, I didn't like yoga, but I like Tai Chi. But there were so many good things. Just overlook the things you didn't care for, didn't like. I made it through yoga every morning, 7:30? Good gosh almighty, except for 2. Anyway, the Pavilion sent me home with a plan. They wrote down meetings for me that I could go to, and they connected me with a psychiatrist and a therapist. And so my husband picked me up from Pavilion, and I didn't want to go home. I'll tell you that I didn't want to go home. I could have stayed there for a year and then maybe tried to work for Pavilion. That would have been perfect for me. But I didn't even think about that then. But anyway, when I got back to Charlotte, I lived in Charlotte at that time. The very next day, I didn't go that same day because it was getting late. But the very next day, I went to the North Noon group, and I made the North Noon group my home group that day because it felt comfortable, and it was a good place. It was a good place for me to get there from home. And I went up after the meeting and asked the chair, who was Catherine. I told her I needed a sponsor. And so she connected me with a girl to be a temporary sponsor. And wouldn't you know, that woman turned out to be a Pavilion alum. And I don't think anybody knew that. But she turned out to be a Pavilion alum. And that was just amazing. But her sponsor wouldn't let her sponsor because, it was too early. She was at Pavilion shortly before I was. But anyway, it was fun while that lasted. But and then I saw the psychiatrist, I saw the therapist, just like I was told to do. I did 90 and 90. And when I was at Pavilion, I kept thinking, you can't bank these programs, these meetings, you can't bank them. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. When you actually, it may be better to bank them and just go to go to 3 a day if you can. But it's I did my 90 and 90. My sponsor, Kathleen here, tricked me into service work. She made me stay. She didn't make me, but she said, you need to stay for this business meeting. I said, okay, I'll stay. And before I knew it, I was a literature rep. So right after the meeting, she took me down to Intergroup in Charlotte and she purchased some books. She showed me how to do it and turned me loose. So after that, I did literature. I don't know whether she ever really knew that I felt like she tricked me into that, but she really did. One thing I want to mention, when I was at, I want to go back a little bit. When I was at Pavillon, I had a couple of things that just hit me like bolts of lightning. One night, I woke up and I sat straight up on the side of my bed in the middle of the night. And what the thought on my mind was, my mother couldn't help it. She did the best she could with what she had. And at that point, my mother was forgiven for all the emotional and physical abuse. And another time, we were on the bus going down to Columbus for a meeting, and it was all kinds of clouds in the sky. I see animals and stuff in clouds, and I can make an animal out of a cloud, but there was a cloud that had like, it was kind of like this. And I thought, oh my, that looks like it's reaching out to me. And I think that might have been the change in my spiritual beliefs. So those were two really, really good things that I'll never forget that happened to me there. Am I still on the uphill climb? I got my little notes here, but okay, I got it. Let me tell you, you can stay sober. You can stay sober. It doesn't matter what happens. 4 weeks after I got out of treatment, I said to my husband, we were both in the bathroom, I said, are we ever going to talk? And he said, yeah. So we went into the kitchen table and sat down, and he said, I still love you, but I don't want to be married to you anymore. After 45 years of marriage. And so eventually, he moved out of the house. And then I got an email one day, and it said that he told me he had pancreatic cancer. And in 2017 or 2000, I think it was 2017, he died of pancreatic cancer. I did get to see him before he died, but I couldn't take care of it. Anyway. Okay. One of the things my sponsor did for me, I asked her one day, I said, how do you pray? And she said, how do you pray? I said, yeah, how do you pray? She said, why don't you write 4 prayers? And so I did. And I still have those 4 prayers today. So after my husband died, I was in a bind because he did not leave me his half of the house. And so I either had to buy out his part of the house from other people who he'd left it to, or because he thought I would never want for anything, or I needed to sell it and let them have their share. So I wrote a prayer for that because it was going to be a long, hard decision. And I want to read you that prayer. I have found that writing prayers is a good way to keep that thinking in the forefront of my mind. The prayer was, I have quite a task ahead of me and some hard decisions to make. I humbly ask for the emotional strength, the wisdom to make the right decisions, and the fortitude to accept the changes with grace. Thy will be done. And I put that in a little frame, and I set it right in front of my computer so that I could see it every time I sat down at my computer, which I did a lot, by the way. So you know what? I sold the house. And I moved to Seneca, South Carolina, so I could be closer to my dad and my sister. When I got here, of course, I didn't want to move in with them. I lived in a motel for 5 months. Anybody who thinks living in a motel for 5 months is terrible, let me tell you something. It was a great life. Somebody comes in, they change your sheets, they had a breakfast there. You don't have to pay electricity, you don't have to pay for internet, you don't have to pay, I mean, it was like, okay, you just have one bill. And I would live in a motel again forever, I guess. I could bought a little George Foreman. I could even cook pork chops and my vegetables in the room. I had everything I needed. But eventually I did find a house. But before I found the home, right after I got settled in the motel, I went to a meeting that I'd been to previously in Seneca, and I made that meeting my home group. My sponsor, Kathleen, told me, I don't ever want to see not want to see your name on this sign-up sheet for service work. And until about 3 months ago, my name, I have never not been doing service work. Because what she said stuck with me. But anyway, excuse me. After I got out of after I moved into my home, I found me a nice little home. And, there's a reason things happen. There's a reason decisions are made. The prayer was answered. Right after that, there was a tornado here. Same time COVID came. My dad and sister both have stage 4 COPD. My dad got very ill. He died in December. And to this day, my sister, she just got she was in the hospital and then in rehab for a month with COPD. And I'm kind of terrified that I'm going to lose her too. So thinking, it's amazing how you can make it through things like that when you're sober. I don't know if I could have made it through things like that when I was drinking. I might have tried to do something I shouldn't have done. With my home group for the past 3 years here, I've been the treasurer. And, you probably could guess that I didn't chair meetings because I'm an introvert. I don't want to get in front of those people. I will do anything else I can do behind the scenes. Just don't put me in front of those people. Telling you about let me tell you a little bit about my program today. One of the best things my sponsor did for me, we not only work the steps, we work the traditions too. Because the traditions are what holds things together. And this is what I did to work the traditions. I read it one time and then answered the question, what is this tradition about? I read it a second time. I answered the question, what is it asking me to do? I read it a third time and answered the question, how does it keep me sober? And I did that for all 12 traditions. So I know the tradition, I had a pretty good solid foundation on the traditions. My home group here, we'll have a tradition meeting on Thursday, the fourth Thursday of every month, and they read the tradition and that's it. And typically, I think that's what's typically like most of the time. Kathleen is from New York. I think they do things a little bit differently in New York, but I can't tell you how thankful I am that I work those traditions too, because I feel like I have a better understanding of AA as a whole. Now, that being said, I have not been back to my home group for a good while because they do things like buy chicken with money and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's just, I feel like they just flying in the face of tradition. And plus the COVID thing too. I didn't want to expose myself and I didn't want to expose my family. So today I go to the Pavillon meetings, unless I absolutely have to miss one. I keep trying to get up at 9 o'clock and go to the winter camp. Maybe I'll do that this week. We'll try. I don't mind doing Zoom meetings at all. There's a great Zoom meeting out of Georgia and Clayton, Georgia. I love it. And those are the friendliest people. They're welcoming to everybody. And, you can just share, do whatever you want to, just like you can in a regular meeting. You just can't hold hands. I still have a lot of connections. I still have a sponsee in Charlotte. We talk every single Sunday morning. She's through the steps, and we just maintain that connection. And how is she doing, etc. I have another sponsee still in Charlotte, and I have a really good friend here who helped fill that hole in my heart when I left the children. I get to go over every other Sunday and work with and have fun with 3 disabled adults. And I absolutely love that and enjoy it. We have a good time. And so not this Sunday, but not today, but next Sunday is my week to go. I have also had sponsees from Pavillon. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5. And more than one has worked for Pavillon or is working for Pavillon. And that just, yay. That makes me so happy. But anyway, so I'm connected in certain ways, real close. And the funny thing about sponsoring people is you tend to work the steps as they work the steps, because it's amazing what sponsees can teach you. And I really appreciate that, because I always get ideas from them, as I hope they do from me. That's enough of my boring life, actually, but I want to talk a little bit about the real things. Let me talk a little bit about the promises. Yes, they do come true. My favorite one is we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. I can actually stop now and think before I open my mouth or make a decision to do something. And it's probably saved me a lot of grief. The key thing is the end. They will always materialize if we work for them. So they're contingent on work. But they do come true, and it is a wonderful way to live. Now, let me talk a little bit about steps. Steps 1, 2, and 3. I pretty much did that in the hospital. I pretty much turned that whole thing over in the hospital. I knew I was done. I knew if I drank again, I was going to die. And so in my mind, that's when I did it without a sponsor. And the one of the best things my sponsor had me do when I started working with her is for step 1, she had me write down everything that was more powerful than I was. Things are still coming to my mind when I think about that. The last one that came to my mind was time. Time is a lot more powerful than I am. So that was great. 4 and 5, the moral inventory. Okay. I told her everything. She told me, before we started, she says, this does not define who you are. Thank you. And I have not done a 4th step again. And I will tell you why. Because the 4th step says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves and admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. It does not say beings. It says being. That's singular. So I've never felt a need to go back and tell my sponsor now, who I haven't talked to in ages, but anyway, the same things I told Kathleen. I will share some of those things with sponsees as I do it. And yes, I do the personal inventories. I do that. But that's how I keep up with the step 4. Step 6 was extremely difficult for me when I looked at my character defects. That's really hard. I'm more of a control freak than I thought I was. And that's coming out more and more every day. Funny thing about those defects, they come and they go. It depends on what the circumstances are. The amends, my sponsor wouldn't let me do any amends without either writing it and reading it to her or talking to her about the amends I was going to make. And to my dad and sister, I wrote, and then I told them, and I have done a major living amends to them and my Cochran family. The prayer, I still write prayers when I have a really difficult decision to make, like one for patience that I wrote for so I could be more patient with my family. That was pretty important to me. Okay, I lost my thing here because wanted to talk a little bit about Pavillon things. Pause, post-acute withdrawal symptoms. Coordination. I had a major hard time with coordination at Pavillon, and I still will not walk up a set of stairs or down a set of stairs without holding on to something. So that is a lingering problem, I guess, drinking caused for me. Then we talked at Pavillon about triggers, which I'm assuming the people at Pavillon right now talk about their triggers. And one of my triggers was being late. I mean, I can lose it over if I think I'm going to be late for something. I was on here a long time before B was on here beginning. I will actually break down. I'm still I try to take care of that by getting there early. Another one of my triggers was I didn't think I could cook without drinking because, hello, I mean, that's why I thought I cooked so much, is so I could drink while I was cooking. No, I cook all the time now, and I don't think about drinking when I'm cooking. It's so that the triggers, sometimes they trigger, sometimes they don't trigger. Do they still write relapse justification papers? Do you know the relapse justification? Anyway, we wrote relapse justification papers when I was there. And it was what could happen that would be okay for you to drink again. My first one was my husband died. Well, guess what? He died. We were divorced then, but he died. I didn't drink. The next two were my dad and my sister, if they died. My dad died. I didn't drink. I didn't even think about drinking. And now my sister is real ill. The last thing I want to do is pick up a drink. And then there's filling holes. You know, that hole that's left. Drinking took a lot of time. I mean, always thinking about do I have enough? Where did I hide it? Da, 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 da. And, you know, trying to figure out one place to go so that they wouldn't see you too much. So you go over here across town to the other place. So hoping nobody would be there that recognized you. But anyway, so I had a lot of holes to fill. I go see my girls. I call them my girls, the disabled ladies. I play a lot of games. I do a lot of cooking. And I've gotten back into the crafty things. I actually leave my sewing machine up now, and I can go in and sew anytime I want to. So that's a really good thing. And I bought watercolor paper and watercolors, and I'm hoping that one of these days I will actually put a paintbrush to a piece of watercolor paper, because that's not an exact kind of painting. You can kind of make it, you know, it's okay if it has mistakes. So I'm going to give that one a try. But it's real fun getting back into those crafty things and things that you used to do when you were even young, and can do them again and enjoy them. And I still maintain contact with my Charlotte family, which is a really good thing. I talk to my sister-in-law every other week during the day, and one of these days I'm going to get back there to see her, which will be a real blessing. and maybe even live there again one of these days. Okay, now I want to tell you what I love most about sobriety. I'm able to laugh spontaneously. I can even laugh at myself spontaneously. It's great to be able to feel emotions and work through them. I'm able to set some boundaries. Do I always set boundaries when I need to? Nah, but I am able to set some boundaries. I have a voice. That's one reason why I think my husband didn't like me much anymore, is because I found my voice when I got sober. It's okay to be alone and not think about a drink. Imagine that. I never would have imagined that I could do that, but I can now. And that's the way I like to be, is alone. And it's wonderful to know that friends or family can call you and know you're not drinking when you pick up the phone and talk for a few minutes. And to be able, and now I can recognize my character defects when they happen. And that is a great thing to be able to do. So step 6 was worth it. And to not be thinking about alcohol all the time. What a blessing. About the only time I think about alcohol is when I pass an ABC store or when I go to a meeting. Other than that, I don't think about alcohol. Now, some of you might ask, how do you find a sponsor? That's normally one of the questions. Let me read my poem, V. This is how I found my sponsor. That's another thing I could do after I got sober. I could actually write poems sometimes. Okay, the title of the poem is, of course, Kathleen. It was dawn. The fog had begun to lift. I saw you. I watched and listened. Your stride was lilting. Your voice was gentle. Your gaze was penetrating and steady. You knew my pain that you would share. In that instance, I knew you were the one you were always meant to be. You waited, and now you freely give. You guide, you listen, you share, you cry, you laugh. You always know what I need. One day my heart will be healed, my faith will be boundless. Then I will give back, and I will share my joy with you. And I wrote that for Kathleen about 5 months after she started being my sponsor. I chose well, and I hope all of you choose well. And that's about all I got to say. Thank you for listening.